It says we are live. Neal
Mr.
Daedalus
Parker.
Jordan, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Good
Yeah,
week?
I think my voice is finally cleared up. Like whenever I get sick, I usually get better pretty quickly, except for just congestion in my voice, and I'm finally clear. So that's
Okay.
always good. And the Easter season also marks kind of the end. My getting married, you find out that, and it takes several years to find this out. You find out that your family has cycles, or
Mhm.
like my family's busy season is from 2 weeks before Christmas, or about a week before Christmas, to Easter. And we are just out of the busy season now. So it's good to be in more
Smooth
more calm.
sailing into like October or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, how old is your youngest? You have one daughter, right?
Just daughter, and she's 9 now. Yeah.
Oh, great age.
Yeah.
That's fun. All right. So, how should we proceed? Should we play something from the Lex Friedman clip? When I said let's talk about the future of economics and socialism, capitalism, and all that, or did you have a different direction? You were working on some notes. What
No,
do you think?
I would say let's follow your lead. I was just excited because you threw a bunch of topics at me and I think you said this, but I agree that there's not many people in the corner that I think we could have a active, constructive, interesting conversation with, and disagree, and yet still do so. And I bet we agree on quite a bit, but yeah, no, I think our interests align fairly closely on a number of these topics. So
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we're going to. It's not so much a disagreement thing as it's going to be, I think, nuance and see what stirs the pot. Because it's not like I stand around talking about this with my wife. She's more like, Trump's driving us off a cliff. What are we going to do? I say, hey, let's move to Portugal.
Well, we could talk about tariffs to start if you want, or you could play the clip.
Let's play the clip.
Like.
Let's play the clip. It's 7 minutes long. I'll play it a little fast so we don't. Nope. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that, folks. Always professional here. All right. All right. Where's my playback speed?
There are a lot of places where redistribution and supply increases go hand in hand. Another good example, I've done over the course of my career a huge amount of work on health insurance reform and universal health care. And let's say you got, Bernie Sanders had become president in 2016 and had swept in a huge Democratic majority, and they passed Bernie's single payer for all plan, which was, by the way, much more expansive than any existing single payer plan in the world, right? It covered much more than Canada's or the UK's or anybody else. If you had done that, what you would have needed immediately was a huge supply increase in healthcare, because you would have had a huge demand increase. What happens if you make healthcare free? People are going to use more of it. If you make insurance much more widespread, people are going to go to the doctor more often. Well, if you don't have enough doctors, you don't have enough nurses, you don't have enough surgeons, you need more. We constrict the supply of all those things using residency rules, using nursing rules, immigration rules, who can practice as a nurse practitioner, what can a nurse practitioner actually do. You have to be attentive to the supply side, even if what you're doing is aggressive redistribution. Now, there are places where these things don't conflict. Like, I'd like to see a much expanded child tax credit, and I don't think that has a big supply side implication one way or the other. But on a lot of the things we're talking about, even if what you want to do, and it is often what we want to do more redistribution, if you're redistributing some kind of thing that gives you access to a good or a service, you need to expand the good or the service. We do rental vouchers. Giving people rental vouchers in the San Francisco housing market, unless you build more housing, just creates something that our friends at the Niskanen Center call cost disease socialism, where you are increasing demand for good at which you've constricted supply. If you do that, you're just going to drive the price up. up. To some degree, that's at least part of the story of higher education. We give people Pell Grants, we give people all kinds of subsidies for higher ed, but we have not done nearly enough to increase supply or regulate the way in which colleges just then pocket part of that money. And so they're building these fancy gyms and they're competing with each other, but they're not actually increasing the supply of slots. It's just certainly not the level we want them to. So there's a lot here where I think it scrambles traditional categories. You cannot do effective redistribution in ways that we would like to see them done, and many people on the left would like to see them done, if you're not taking supply of the thing that you're subsidizing seriously.
If you think about it from a first principle standpoint.
All right. That's really the juxt of it. The problem of supply when all you do is fund demand. It's really, it seems to me like, I'm sure it became a problem with congressional spending in the 70s, say, maybe even going back to the 60s. But it went turbocharged after Bill Clinton, right? When Bill Clinton entered office, the era of big government was over. Now it's all government does is write checks. And then we just kept doubling down with, crisis upon crisis and stimulus upon stimulus, and then more writing of checks and more writing checks until finally we hit COVID, and that's all they did was write checks, fueling demand without paying any attention whatsoever to supply, which goes to the heart of, this is why we call it the abundant future. And this is their argument, Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein, that the future, if Democrats can get, or the government can get supply right, the problem is not really scarcity of many of the services and goods people need. It's constraint while fueling demand. What do you think? What did you think of their argument, Neal?
Yeah, I think there's a deeper problem on both healthcare. I think college falls into this category.
Yeah.
The supply and demand. So because we talked a little bit about this after our estuary, and I said there are so many challenges. I wrote down some of the challenges I could outline. So how do you detect fraud? Motivations for detecting fraud when it is not a business. A business is highly, highly motivated to detect fraud. Is government as motivated to detect fraud? But then you have another problem, which I'll call the healthcare as the Deus ex machina problem, where, in the 50s, let's say, did people see the hospital or their family doctor as the source and summit of all solutions to their problems? Like how do we treat health? Well, like, what's our relationship to healthcare today compared to the way it was in the previous generation and then the last generation, and so on and so forth? And so you also have a subset of the population that and this has only gotten worse since COVID, fundamentally distrusts healthcare institutions and physicians, and it's more so men than women, and more so rural than urban. So you have the problem of people who are not seeking care. You have the problem of people who are seeking care, seeking for the right answers in all the wrong places, you could say. And we could talk about behavioral health also, which is, huge. The problem is so multifaceted, but I think I could probably boil it down to a few things, which is, number one, probably obesity. Number two, behavioral health and how we've thought about mental health or behavioral health over the past 50 years and how that's changed. And I'm packing a lot of my own assumptions into that, but this is the place to speculate. And then number three is this problem of, like, the right service with the right expectation, the right place at the right time, and reestablishing trust. And yeah, so yeah, wherever you want to go with that.
Well, Well, first, can you go step back and address what they're talking about? How does that what you're talking about tie into what they're talking about? Because you mentioned
Supply and
fraud.
demand.
Yeah, because their argument is it's largely more often. I mean, through the penal system, you can correct for fraud. That's criminal justice and all that.
Supply, a big part of well, let's talk about the demand side first of healthcare. So what I was talking about is directly related to the demand side, because how many appointments, how many ED visits, how many hospital visits could have been addressed with something either. So in healthcare, you have the idea of acuity. So if the patient could have been properly treated with a ambulatory office visit, just a regular office visit, that's better than the patient showing up at the emergency room after it's gotten way worse. If the patient could have been treated at the emergency room, that's way better than than an ambulance coming and having to take the patient to the hospital. And so you have this tension of, okay, you have patients who are seeking care for things where it's unnecessary, or it's something that is it really at the level of urgency or importance, and it's so hard because sometimes let's say the evidence would say 99 out of 100 times it's not a big thing, but what about the 1 out of 100 times? And then on the other side of the demand, on the demand side of healthcare, then you have all these other situations where people just don't trust the healthcare institutions. So they're not getting a flu shot. So they're not getting a pneumovax. They're not getting the colonoscopy and the mammogram and the this and the that. So the simple. So fundamentally, it's like a problem of trust, and then managing the relationship between a healthcare, and the problem is it used to be like a doctor, so you had a relationship with your doctor, and now you have a relationship with an institution, with an organization. So how much of healthcare is transactional versus how much is relational with, oh, I actually know my doctor well, he lives in my neighborhood, I see him every week at church, I trust my doctor, I can talk to him or her about a casual issue, and then I'm advised accordingly to do the right thing based on that relationship of trust, versus like I have to message someone over a device, and am I actually hearing back from a robot, or maybe I should just grok it or Google it to figure out what I should do. So it's anyway. So that trust and that relationship aspect, and the idea that the consumer is always right. Like, what do you do if the consumer is always right, but then they're not seeking care, and then they're ending up in the hospital again and again and again? So it's all these different it's mostly a psychological problem in terms of the demand side, mostly. And sorry, when I say psychological, it's really social. It's a relationship thing.
You actually work in this industry, right?
I do.
Healthcare. Okay. Yeah. On the insurance side or on the medical practitioner side?
More so the medical practitioner side.
Okay, like a hospital or something, that kind of thing.
I don't want to go into too much.
No specifics.
But
okay, but yeah. Okay.
I know more
institutional. Could we say institutional?
Yeah, I'll just say I know more about the ambulatory side of the world, so office visits, stuff like that. I know a lot about that. I know less about the hospital side.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Would you agree that part of the problem is we have too few doctors?
Maybe. It's kind of like the problem is the problem with universities, is the reason that the cost of universities is so high, is the problem we have too few universities.
Doesn't the AMA actually control some of that on how many they graduate? And
I think so. I honestly don't know that much about that. I don't know if it's based on just like a testing standard that you have to, and I don't know if that testing standard has increased or lowered over time. Yeah, I don't know the history of that.
Well, I think what Ezra Klein mentioned was residency requirements and things. I mean, there's lots of ways to constrict supply And part of that is part of the interest of the medical establishment is to, uh, just like in a sense, like any union, it's to keep incomes up for the rank and file, so to speak, their doctors and if there's too many of them out there, then there's their value will decrease on the market.
Yeah, there's also the cost of what it actually takes to
It's extremely expensive.
to bring someone from, let's say, a college education to being a fully functional attending physician,
Right.
which it's not just the schooling, but it's the years of residency and training. And not only that, like during those years of residency, they make $30K a year. So it's expensive to go to med school. The residency, they don't make much. So it's about an 8-year investment. And that's if you're going into primary care, which pays decently, but it's like, maybe $150K a year, which is good, but it's not like wealth. And to really make bank, then you've got to get into typically medical specialty, you'll do better. But sorry, a medical specialty, you'll do better than primary care. But so those are things like endocrinology, rheumatology, et cetera. But the money maker specialties are your surgical specialties.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, they pointed out that Bernie's healthcare solution was going to be the biggest of all time, right? I mean, it was bigger than anything that Europe was doing at the time. Probably still is, I'm guessing. What's things like, in your opinion, one of the things he was going to offer was free dental. It seems to me like you could improve people's health a lot by giving them healthy teeth. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the kind of thing that why we what do you think? I mean,
Yeah.
yes, it would it would make dentistry where we're going to find a dentist to do all the work, because you have a lot of people not getting dental work done, going to the dentist because they can't afford to, and getting the work done, but they would be physically much healthier if they didn't have gum disease and weren't losing teeth when they're or not getting cavities filled and having teeth rot out of their heads when they're in their 20s and 30s and 40s. So well, okay, if I'm trying to come up with a reasonable question, because it strikes me as obvious. So it's really hard to ask a question for something you think is obvious.
Well, I think I could tell you that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can tell you the healthcare industry's answer to the problem that you're presenting, which is, have you heard of value-based care?
Fill it out for me, maybe.
Okay. So the idea of value-based care, and unless something significantly changes in the direction that the U.S. healthcare industry is going, and I'm not saying that it couldn't change, because Trump administrations seems to be willing to throw wrenches all over the place, but the way the U.S. healthcare industry is going, value-based care is when the insurance companies negotiate with a healthcare organization, and they'll say, okay, so we have this percentage of patients that are regarded as like higher risk patients, meaning let's say they have diseases that are more likely to cause hospitalization or an emergency visit. So things like diabetes, congestive heart failure, high blood pressure, it's hypertension, things like that. And it's in both the insurance companies and the healthcare system's best interest to serve the patients in such a way that keeps them as healthy as possible and keeps them out of the hospital. So the idea is that if we can work together to So if you think of most healthcare as reactive, meaning they don't schedule a visit for Mark Parker unless Mark Parker calls, unless Mark Parker shows up, unless you have
Right.
to do all those things. And it's moving the healthcare model from reactive to proactive. So it's the idea of okay, we as the healthcare organization, we're going to take responsibility for these 50,000 patients or whoever. Like we agree that this is the patient population that is like highest risk, and we agree with the insurance company. And if we're able to reduce readmission, or if we're able to reduce hospital admissions, reduce ED visits, we're going to split the savings, whatever money is saved, basically. So it's trying to create financial incentives to proactively get patients the care they need. So within that, there's a huge component that's called social determinants of health. So the idea is like, maybe you can't afford your medications and that's why you're not taking them. Or maybe it's even simpler than that, which is your office visit is like a mile away and you don't have money to get transportation to that.
Or you work, or you work long hours and 2 jobs, and your doctor, you would have to leave work to attend to a doctor's visit,
Yep.
and you can't afford to do that.
Yep. So it's basically the healthcare organization is then motivated to move from reactive mode to proactive mode.
So how
And
do they do that, and do we have any examples of that happening?
every major healthcare organization in the U.S. does this. Every significant one.
I never hear from my doctors proactively.
Okay.
I'm in an HMO.
You might not be in that high risk bracket.
I see. So if you got to be at a certain level of
Correct.
risk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So and they're using a combination of AI, and there are third party vendors out there that basically sell their, like, we have the best model for detecting.
So if
the
I'm
highest risk.
pre-diabetic or something, then maybe I would get more attention.
Well, but if you're talking about a socialized healthcare system where we're going to serve everyone according to their needs, rather than, like, do you treat everyone equally or do you treat everyone according to their needs? And it's really tricky because you can't do both. You either have to treat everyone equally or according to their needs. Now, healthcare is one of the few areas where, historically speaking, in the world, well, in the United States especially, like the attitude is no, we treat you according to their needs. I mean, we say that especially for kids. Like, we would say, oh, a kid has cancer, it's going to cost $5 million to save that kid. Like, we're gonna do that. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're a Christian nation. Now, nobody actually admits to that, but that's the source of that realization. I don't know if, let's say, a kid in India has cancer, that they as a society, like, that costs $5 million to save their life. Like typically that kid is flown to the United States or a European country or something like that. Like, I know we do that kind of stuff,
Right. I hear Indian healthcare is improving, but I don't know what it's like for common folk who make whatever the $1,500 a year or something that they make. I don't know what the income is these days for Indians, but it's still not very high.
Yeah, it's rising though.
Yeah. Well, here's what I mean. My wife. I've watched my wife work with economically distressed families for over 3 decades now, and frankly, maybe a kid with cancer will get special attention, but a kid needs, like I said, needs dental work. There's no one there to give it to him. I mean, it's very hard to get, and it takes lots of time, and there are lots of obstacles along the way. And it's there used to be things that were done to get kids their glasses, eyeglasses, and stuff like that. That seems to not be as on the ball as it used to be. So you're talking, people, why can't these kids do better in school? Well, maybe they don't see too well, things like that. They don't. So the basics, yeah, I mean, I can see where, as a Christian nation, I think if we really are a Christian nation, what we do for the average kid is pretty pathetic. I wouldn't call it very Christian. Maybe what we do for high visibility cases, because we can't stand to look ourselves in the mirror in the morning if we didn't take care of them. Who knows? But
that kid who needs dental work, how many of those situations are because it's a single mom with 4 kids and she doesn't have the time to properly teach, or sometimes the ability to properly teach a child how to brush his or her own teeth? Like how many of these issues are
it could be
social in nature versus like healthcare access in nature?
Could be prenatal. I mean, it could be, yeah, who knows what's going on. Dietary, I think Clint mentioned the quality of food people get, and we know that poor people tend to eat more out of a box and can than people who are better off. And we know processed foods are nutritionally of less value. So yeah, but see, this is, to me, I guess I'm more interested in the economics of it. Because I don't think it's possible for us, as in the words of the famous Chad, the girl dad, as just a common dweeb, I have no credibility to allocate resources. My attitude is it's not getting done. I mean, have you just even if you're still a kid, just take it in terms of like behavioral health. It's a joke. I mean, if it's insured, if you're looking for insurance to pay, finding and I'm in a densely populated area, 4 million people within the 2 counties of San Bernardino and Riverside County, where I'm at, probably within a 30-minute radius. And we, you can't get in to see a psychiatrist or psychologist in a timely fashion unless you go to the emergency room and you're in crisis. But if you're depressed and you need help, it's 6-week wait or more.
So I think this statistic, I could look this up real quick, but someone in the chat could double check me. But I think the statistic is something like 50% of people under the age of 25 or 30 have been diagnosed with at least one mental health or behavioral health diagnosis. Like 50% under the age of, and I forget what that threshold is, either 25 or 30.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, so where's the limit on that? Like, do we get to the point where it's 90%? And then does everyone need to become a behavioral health counselor? And then doesn't that just mean we're all friends to each other, in effect? Like, wait, so you're talking about the supply and the demand side. I read something once, and again, I'm speculating on this, but that the clinically, and I, by the way, I should preface with what I'm about to say with, I think it's different for children with certain conditions. I like what I'm about to say does not apply to, let's say, a specific medical condition that requires a specific intervention that is proven that no. So, for example, you have kids who are not in speech therapy early. And the earliest you get a kid into speech therapy, it makes a huge, huge difference. And so there are absolutely like certain interventions in, with speech therapy is not behavioral health actually, but for adults, from what I know of the literature, having a close friend to talk your deepest issues with about is virtually identical with counseling, with therapy. Now, there might be some forms of therapy, like I've heard, and I don't know the latest literature around this, but I've heard that cognitive behavioral therapy is particularly effective at getting people to basically see their patterns of behavior and then abstract out and then be able to change their mindset, so to speak, based on that ability to see themselves more clearly. But yeah, so I would say, like, let's say of the percentage of people who need behavioral health treatment in any regard, I would ask, like, for all those people, and you only need to look at like 3 or 4 things. And I would wager, like, do they have friends? Do they have a reliable family? Do they have let's say higher purpose, meaning you could put religion into that, but some higher purpose or meaning? Do they have a stable work employment? And if they have those 4 things, I would wager less than 10% of the people in behavioral health treatment have all 4 of those things. They're missing at least 1, and maybe 2, and maybe 3 of those things. And so, like, when we're looking at the economics of this, and there's part of me, I'm always thinking about, like, the scale of these things. Like, is the United States, is the problem of the United States the scale of the United States? Like, is the reason that, let's say, like Sweden or Finland or Norway, I don't think they have these level of issues, both on the both on the behavioral health side, but also on the generic health side, like obesity, stuff like that.
Just that they're smaller.
Yeah. Is it the scale of?
I've wondered too if I was during the last Trump administration, I played around a little bit with the independence crowd in California, which were kind of a group of ragtag extreme progressives, but it was like herding cats, and a lot of it did show signs of having foreign influence, so to say. So it was never something that I stuck with, but it's I think, though, to me, it makes a lot of sense just to give states a lot more autonomy. I mean, just we maybe keep the United States as a unit for continental defense, and then let the states reorganize themselves regionally and organize their services and economies to suit their people and their needs without any federal involvement. Because I think California could afford to be a kind of Norway of the Pacific. It would just be very mixed. It'd be, have a strong Latin flavor, but.
But aren't there some states? I remember when Mitt Romney got criticized by the right for you're the guy who did universal health care in Massachusetts. So aren't there states that have the more broad-based healthcare? I don't know what universal actually means, for the states, but no.
Nah, the problem, as they say with Ezra Klein and what's his name, Derek Thompson, what their book points out, I may go in other clips with Lex Friedman, they go into it some, is that the blue states have made lots of, in the blue cities have made lots of big promises, but they're very poor at the execution because they've not attended to the supply problem. So whenever, like, I remember this was 10 years ago now, maybe more, when LA went on a big push to end homelessness. Well, by the time they were done, I think it cost over $500,000 to build some tiny little apartment. It's like a studio apartment to house a homeless person, which today now it's close to $750,000. And so of course nothing ever gets done, you know. Uh, the problem just persists, and a lot of it has to do with uh, these same areas that are supposedly liberal also are controlled by NIMBYs. So once you get, I have mine, and I don't want anybody getting, don't build a housing complex in front of my beautiful mountain view or my ocean view. And this is a problem in LA, San Francisco. They go into a lot of detail in their book on this, and it is worth reading for that. The blue states have done a miserable job of executing on their promises, which undermines the trust of the voters at the federal level. On the other hand, the burn it all down approach, as we are already, I mean, is that really what's going to work? Is that,
Well, okay. So if we sort of fractal this out, we can have a no man or no person left behind strategy in a family because the relationships are tight enough and strong enough. Now, sometimes the person is so terrible in what they're doing that even then it's really, really hard. But so like families are often the best position to have like a no man or woman left behind sort of thing, where we're going to intervene, we're going to pick up that person. And then okay, maybe you have a let's go to the 200 person level. Like maybe you have a church where someone loses their job and their family's about to be like lose their mortgage, and the church pitches in, but it requires like a high trust atmosphere in that next level. And so the problem is, as I see it, is trust has been steadily eroding over the last.
How many churches can help people who are underwater in their house by hundreds of thousands of dollars or even tens of thousands of dollars?
Yeah,
I don't see how that works.
It's temporary. Yeah, it's a temporary measure typically. Yeah.
It's if you get. Now we're going to see a lot of people lose jobs. They're losing them fast already. Chris is in the chat. He mentioned on his stream that he's got some concerns about his job, and I assume it's probably because he's a programmer. You can tell us if you're, And
the tech job market is brutal. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, anybody in I assume data entry's got problems. I assume, government work has problems now. It seems like, yeah, I mean, community can help, but in the economy and the culture we've created for ourselves, it seems radical in the extreme to go to what is a kind of communitarian solution that you're talking about. We'll pitch in when we have problems, and everybody brings food during a funeral or something. But if we're talking about helping feed and house families in place where they're at.
Well, I'll just give you a small example, which is that when Chad announced that he and Ann were expecting, and they put together a gift list or what is it called? A registry for the baby shower.
Mm-hmm.
It got filled.
Sure.
Like the whole thing got filled. And, you might say, oh, but the thing is, it's like, but you got to compare something like that to like a regular grift. McMo's having a really hard time getting to Midwestuary as a regular grift versus like a one-time, okay, there's a one-time thing for a specific thing, a show of love, a show of support. So it's always but given our trust level within TLC is way higher, I would say, than even many church communities, which is sad. I wouldn't say it's higher than the ideal church community or the ideal small community, but I've never encountered a community in person with the size and scale and yet trust level of the people I know within TLC, which is remarkable that we're not in person and yet we somehow still trust each other. But what I'm saying is like that level, that in between layer between the state and the family is all but gone. And that
But that's not a problem, as they point out in the Scandinavian countries.
It's less of a problem. Yeah.
Well, they just have higher. I mean, they do trust their news sources. They trust their local government more. They trust their neighbors more. They're less paranoid or anxious about graft, fraud, waste, and abuse. And they pay much higher taxes, and they're more satisfied with the government they have.
Well, I think people are willing and happy to pay taxes to the extent that they trust where that money is going. And so again, I hate to, I know I'm beating this drum over and over and over again, but it's the strength of your principalities or the strength of your institutions is only as strong as the trust that binds.
Right. So what's why can't Americans trust and Scandinavians can? Why can't we do what the Finns do? Is it just size? Is that it?
I think so. So if you don't know, like I don't know most people in my neighborhood. I don't even know if I could identify most people in my neighborhood by their face. Like if I saw their face, I would say like, oh, I think that person lives here, but like, I'm not sure. So, and I'm not the most antisocial person in my neighborhood. That much I'm sure. And because I actually do have in-person friends in my neighborhood. So, and my daughter plays with our neighbor's daughter like all the time, right next door. So, I really do think a lot of it is just the size and scale. Now, take New York City, but let's do a counterpoint because just bear with me. So let's take like New York City, 1920s and 30s. Let's say Great Depression, New York City. So I'm pretty sure you still had things like violence against. I'm pretty sure you had like labor violence against factories and management during that time, or you had food lines. But I would also wager that the areas of New York were pretty. People knew each other in the local neighborhoods. Like people didn't have cars. They weren't separated by the glass and the steel. They knew each other in like they knew each other by the churches, but also the ethnic communities. Like you had an Italian ethnic community. You had Harlem, which was African American ethnic community. So I don't know. Like I'd be curious to just better understand like how did the average person know their neighbors in 1930 in a highly densely populated place like New York City compared to today. And it's the kind of thing where like today you see anyone on the street and they're stuck in their phone. So even though they have their neighbors, their all their attention is focused on, let's say, the global level of principality. And what I mean by global is like they're attending to on their phone whatever the thing is globally that they're most interested in. It's not whatever's going on in their local community, except for a few highly motivated people. Yeah.
Well, you have in subcultures, right? I mean, whether it's a church subculture or ethnic subculture, you probably have higher layers of trust. It's like when I think of New York City, I think of something like that. You have like Hasidic Jews, and they kind of have they live in tightly knit, still to this day, tightly knit communities, neighborhoods. Even in Palm Springs, if you go down to Palm Springs you'll see them walking on a Saturday, and they're a certain form of dress, and they live obviously very close to each other, and they're it stands out. You can see it because they've dressed in a certain way. It's obvious.
So
I'm
it's
just not
that,
sure why that's a solution, though.
well, the reason is that, like, it is possible to establish lines of trust that are not based on kinship or ethnicity. And I think Jesus is the cornerstone of that. But I would say the most common form of that trust right now is by interest. You know, that's the authenticity over sincerity, is that, oh, people that are interested in the same thing, they'll have a book club, or they will, all, I don't know, like watch NASCAR racing together, or they'll, or they went to the same alma mater, so they get together, or, but it's based on more of a shared interest today, which honestly I think is good. I'll just outright say it. I think it's better that we find our kinship, like, who is my brother and my sister, or one who does the will of the Father. I think it's better that we find the people that we're trusting most closely to be the people that we're aligned with in our values. I think that's somewhat more honest than, like, I'm kind of a super, I wear this label, like I'm kind of a super boomer for that reason, that I think that's like a necessary and good thing in the long run. But in the short run, like what that inevitably is going to do is it's going to bring people closer together physically, like geographically, that are aligned. And this is already happening. Like, if I know he's not a particularly favored author, but Charles Murray wrote this book called Coming Apart. And it's the state of white America post, and people are gravitating towards not just the states, but the local communities and even the neighborhoods that share their political leanings, that share their economic leanings. So, like, in 1950s America, you had a CEO who would safely and happily live in the same neighborhood as their factory workers in 1950s America. Because the difference in lifestyle and outcome between a CEO and the typical worker, yeah, they made a lot more, but it wasn't such a big divide that they were afraid of the normal person. And now it's, we are segregated from each other by economic status, by political leanings, yeah, all of that. So,
well, this is one of the things they address, though, is you can't even build a road now, right? I mean, it's the amount of you in the 1950s is when we built the great interstate highway system, and most of the freeways were laid out. And I mean, even if they weren't completed in the 60s and 70s, they were begun in that they have their origins in that period of the 50s, 60s. And now try to build a new highway because there's so much, there is distrust, and there are people who there are all these legal hurdles to address, and it just in building a road. Social impact, economic impact, environmental impact. And I think one of the solutions that Ezra Klein is offering is that we get back to just building, ruthlessly building. Maybe not dams so much, but nuclear power plants and housing. Just build it. NIMBYs be damned. Build it fast, build it cheap, get it up, make it work, build it well, because time is money when it comes to construction, as anybody knows.
Well, I found the other video that you sent me really interesting, and I don't have enough points of reference to confirm or reject anything that the gentleman that Ezra Klein was interviewing, I forget his name, but basically the gist of it was he talked about China. Like, the number one thing I took away from that conversation, yeah, so it was a guy who's very familiar with China, and he said that in the United States, all the cost is on the front end for, like, doing something new, for innovating, for let's say building a road, like you mentioned. All the cost is on the front end, And in China, the government will identify, hey, we need this, and 100 companies will compete and be incentivized to compete, and then the cost is on the back end becoming as efficient at it as possible. And I'm not sure I have an answer to that, to all the limitations, because I think the answer has been, in the United States, entrepreneurs moving to more entrepreneurial friendly locales, whether it's from California to Texas or other migrations, which is all well and good, but it doesn't solve the trust issue, as I see it.
Well, if at least, well, the government was much more authoritarian in the 1920s, 30s, 40s than really at any time in our history. I mean, we look back and think, everybody talks about getting the government off our back. The government's been getting off your back really since Jimmy Carter. We've been cutting taxes ever since Jimmy Carter. We've been shrinking government and reducing regulation since Jimmy Carter. And yet the more they cut, the worse government gets at delivering on its promises, and prices just keep going up.
I don't think inflation has been so much of an issue. I think working class wages have been the main issue.
Well, housing inflation is definitely an issue here in California.
No, housing, yes. I would say housing, healthcare, higher education. Those three.
Yeah. All of them are way out of whack with actual inflation in the broader economy. Which goes to where government spending is. Government spending is high in education, high in healthcare, and not so much. Well, there are vouchers and rent controls, but I'm trying to think. It's nothing at the same scale in housing as it is in healthcare and education.
Housing is so varied in its cost depending on locale. And the supply and demand of housing is a really interesting thing, because on one hand, I find it very difficult to have sympathy, let's say, for the young man or woman who's like, I have to live where all the other cool kids are that are my age and my people. Like, I have to live in Greenwich Village, or I have to live here. And then complaining that, like, oh, housing costs are so high, but like anywhere else that you want to go, it's like, it's 20% of what costs are there. And then we're more connected virtually than ever, but it's like, I have to be here with my people. So on one hand, I don't have a ton of sympathy for that, but on the other hand, I do, because like, I do understand the desire to be in a close, in the same place with the people that you know and you love. And so, I think a lot of those constraints are artificial to preserve the status quo. I think a lot of those constraints are the reason for so much resentment of the younger generations towards the older generations, because they see the older generations as perpetuating the power structures and in general, the structures that allow them to keep their wealth, keep their neighborhoods, keep their systems, and make it almost impossible to break into those systems. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And so,
is it really, I mean, talking about being a Christian nation, is it really very Christian to be complaining that your parents and grandparents aren't dying at the rate that their parents and grandparents died at?
No, it's not. But they don't complain about that. They complain about why is housing so expensive?
Why aren't they?
Why can't I get a house in the neighborhood I grew up in? The neighborhood I grew up in, why can't I get a house for, with the job like my parents, like, that's similar.
Well, you can only build so many standalone single family dwellings with 7,000 square foot lots.
Yeah, well, so that's
another space.
The average house since has gotten way bigger. So you had 5 people in like 1,500 square feet. or 1,300 square feet back in the 50s, or and now it's like 5 people. You need at least 2,500 square feet.
Mandatory retirement ages. It'd be great. I think I'd like to have my wife retire sooner than later. But in the United States, we keep pushing it back. I mean, you used to retire at 64, I think. If you got yourself full Social Security, now it's 67 and then 70, isn't it, for people even younger than me?
I like McMo's most recent comment.
This
I think
one?
it's a good one.
You guys are helping me see something. Our system is based on people doing things for money. Before globalization, your work directly helped your community. Now you help the community by consuming. What do you like about that? Why don't I ask you that question? What would
So take have you ever seen the show
I
Deadwood?
mean, it's not wrong. I'm not disagreeing with it, but go ahead.
You ever see the show Deadwood?
Yes.
Okay. There's the FPS, or the FPM, the fucks per minute on that show is higher than almost every other show in the history of TV. But because you can measure different shows and movies by the FPM, but Deadwood's got a very high, or maybe it's cocksucker. That's the vernacular from Deadwood. Anyway, so if people don't like that word, don't watch Deadwood. There's
lots of reasons not to watch Deadwood, but it's a good show in its own way. But yes, I really
anyway, but in Deadwood, like the Wild Wild West, if you have a problem, there's only one guy who's a doctor.
Right.
If you have a problem with let's say your horse threw a shoe or something, and you need you got to go to the blacksmith. So like everything you do is interconnected and relational. It's like if you got a standing feud with the blacksmith, you're screwed, because the blacksmith's the only one who can actually like solve your problem.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, if the economy, part of Deadwood's story is it's the formation of a civilization out of chaos. And that was explicitly David Milch's mission. According to a documentary he said that HBO did about the show, his vision was the original pitch was in Rome, ancient Rome, but they'd already had a show about Rome going, and so he went with the Wild West thing. And so that's where all the violence and it's the craziness comes from. And then the money, the money attracts more and more economic activity, and civilization builds up around it. So you end up with more than one blacksmith. Ultimately, you start with one blacksmith, but you end up with more than one blacksmith. And in time, the individual miners give up their claims to big business, right? To the Hearst, right? In the show.
That's the Pareto principle in action that's going on there. The consolidation of power into fewer and fewer hands. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't.
Where
People consume. Part of living is consuming. I'm not really sure how you. Is the solution to make everybody monks? I mean, and you if you kill demand, you could in theory. We're experimenting with this now. We're going by edict, destroying sections of the economy. You're going. So you can send us backwards in time so that we live more primitive lives, live with less. Back in the day, back in the 1950s, there's a play called Death of a Salesman. I don't know if you've seen it. but one of the family's achievements was paying off the refrigerator, because there was a time when you actually financed refrigerators. They were as expensive as buying a car. So very expensive item in a house, and people financed them. And so it was a big deal to pay off the refrigerator. We can go back to that. I mean, but what good does it do for anybody? Oh, yes, we'll consume less. And so what? I'm not sure what you achieve with that.
Well, if you think about it, the typical number of bills and payments of the typical person has just gone up over time. So 10 years ago, you didn't have to pay a YouTube Red subscription, a Netflix subscription, a Hulu membership, a Spotify. I don't even have all these things, but like, you know, the expectation of like normal person, cell phone bill, high-speed internet, like all of these new services that we just take for granted. Like, oh, cars cost more now. Well, did your car back in 1935 have power steering and airbags and power windows and windshield wipers and, you know, like
Right.
air conditioning? And so like we basically assume that every new thing we get is an entitlement and cost should remain flat. Like that's the base assumption. And it's even worse than that, because the base assumption is every new thing is just expected and entitled and costs remain flat. But I'm always comparing myself to the shiniest, fanciest. And not only that, I'm only comparing myself to that which is publicly shared on social media, not the bills and the debt collectors and the this and the that. It's the person I know, you know. Anyway, so I think two things have happened. I think number one, our expectations of like what is normal actually includes way more cost, way more technology, way more stuff than it used to. And then the second thing is we have inflated expectations based on the scale, based on the globalization of everything. Like we no longer judge ourselves based on Sally's roses that are across the street and I can't get my roses as red. It's like you're judging yourself based on the world-class botanist who is competing with other world-class botanists for views on YouTube or TikTok for like the brightest, most beautiful roses.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Let me be flippant. So what? I'm not sure what that does to us one way. Was that bad? Or even if it's true, is that necessarily bad?
Well, I guess where does the abundance come in? Like what is the abundance that we're going to have? Maybe we could pivot this conversation because we only have about half an hour. But the you know, where is technology going to? Because I see all the fundamental problems are either social in nature or where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Like those two things. They're either social or that values, for lack of a better word. You know, I don't know.
Well, I think what they're talking about when they talk, the book is called something abundance or something. It's I think the title of the book is Abundance. I agree that I mean, I don't think you're going to get any disagreement from me, or we both agree that people need to do more of what we do here in the corner, right? Build friendships, talk, find meaning, live for stuff other than stuff, right? Live in a way that you're not just in pursuit of status and pleasure and comfort, but to contribute and live for others and to do for others. But it's which is the path towards getting there? Is it really the Trump JD Vance solution, or is it the Bernie AOC solution.
I think it's way worse than that.
Help me out.
Well, I think
I think most people are. Oh no, go ahead. You were going to.
yeah, no, I think we're gonna ping pong between those two things for a long period of time until we hit, let's say, a different paradigm of thinking about reality. So like I think we're gonna ping pong. I think government is going to become increasingly topsy-turvy as we increasingly put expectations on government to solve problems. Yeah. And so so okay.
What
So
problems?
Trump,
There's some problems I can't solve for you. I can't give you. I can't. If you need a new heart, I can't provide that for you.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
My 20 churches combined probably couldn't combine it for you. Couldn't provide it for you. They might, if they're rich enough and numerous enough, be able to pay for it, maybe. But I mean, that's.
I think so. I think if it's possible that with AI we become so efficient at delivering simple things efficiently, that we're able to lower the cost of let's say basic human needs. The real way that costs get lowered is you don't require a person for the service or the product. So what I mean by that is like everything is delivered to your door by drone or by completely automated car with a completely automated humanoid robot that steps out of that car and delivers something. Your healthcare, you go in, you get a full body scan. They know exactly what's going on with you based on that full body scan, and the AI algorithm automatically gives you the exact pills and the exact doses, taking your genetic information into account and your family history and all of that. So like that's a possible future, that your basic needs in housing, healthcare, you might even say like my neighbors are too loud, and they're like, okay, we'll give you a pod here, and it's out in the country, and everything can be flown to you by a drone, and it's like, okay, cool, I'll be all alone, great.
I think it's very we had this offline. This is the abundance part is probably what exactly along the lines you're saying. When we had a private conversation after the estuary meeting, it was I think the potential for AI. I mean, we will probably perfect molecular robots before we perfect widespread larger robots just moving around, because it's working at the molecular level can be more scalable and easier than it is working in making a big machine act like a human being, So humanoid looking robots, the android, the datas are probably further along down the road than little robots that monitor your physical health, flooding through your bloodstream and breathing them into your lungs and having them repair your cancers or whatever. I think totally agree. The problem probably for us morally isn't going to be scarcity; it is going to be abundance, and that presents its own set of problems, right?
Well, let's say God compares to us. If I compare God to me, God has so much more than me. Is that a moral problem? So what I'm saying is, like, if I can exist with AI in my perfect virtual reality where everything I want to deliver me happiness is delivered to me at every hour of the day, and even the physical things that I want, like I want a castle and I want to live in 1550 and I want to be the kingdom, I want to be the head of the kingdom of Jordan. Oh, it turns out that kingdom exists already. I in my virtual reality that could just happen for me, and then boom, I'm there. And that with technology, that could be something that we have. So then you might say, oh, so what is the superabundance then, what is the moral imperative then, if your only poverty is limited by your own imagination, poverty of thought. So the person's own imagination, they can't imagine as big or as interesting a castle, or as so what I'm saying is, like, with enough technology, you get to the end of the line where you can give everything exactly what they want, and it's completely meaningless.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean anything. It's like video game paradise, like if you've seen holodeck in Star Trek.
Mhm.
And more men are increasingly going into that because they don't see a better path that actually is viable, that requires, this is where I'm pretty strictly Petersonian. Like, I would say self-sacrifice for a higher goal.
Well, what if here,
Yeah.
I mean, what if unless you die by accident, there's your natural lifespan is indefinite. That you can de-age
Yeah.
to
I mean,
35, and that's your permanent age until you get hit by a truck and you can't get repaired anymore.
like, if you
Or
de-aged your
you
brain,
self-delete.
if you de-aged your brain back to a 35-year-old Mark Parker, are you still Mark Parker with
Mhm. No.
many more
Oh.
years of memory? And, like, so as I've gotten older and my mind has changed, like, I've thought about that eternal youth question, and it's like, um I think it's good that our lives end. I really, like,
Mhm.
I think we go through a state, we go through a period, we have an experience for a particular period of time that we're meant to have, and then there's a different experience, and it's a new experience, and,
But
like,
what's the church's response to in your case, it is the church.
yeah,
I mean, what does the church say? For the last 2,000 years, it said suicide is bad, very, very
yeah.
bad. And, but, you there's no option out. I mean, particularly for those born into this,
Well,
right?
I think the church's stance will be that I think it's actually, even more than what you expect, which is, I think the church will say it's immoral to take a pill that leads to the fountain of life. Like, the same way the church will say that it's immoral to abort, or it's immoral to have reproductive endocrinology and infertility. Well, sorry, in vitro fertilization. I'm not, I'm not an expert on the church's teachings,
But
but
I don't think it'll work that explicitly. I don't think it'll be a fountain of youth type of scenario where it's or you or Eve's apple, whatever. It is going to be more like, of course, you want optimal health. You want your child to not catch this or that disease, and this little injection of self-replicating nanobots will prevent this disease and that disease and repair this or that birth defect and compensate for this or that cognitive deficiency, so that and it'll be for, as I said, children born into it will probably not even think of it. It was never an option. The systems it'll be in the air and the water you drink, in a sense, that it'll just be flowing through you. Things that optimize your health, that perpetuate your lifespan indefinitely, will be just part of the air you breathe.
sounds like a Black Mirror episode. But well, they're already talking about
I'm not
taking.
advocating it. I'm just
Yeah,
saying, to me, it seems like a logical conclusion of the technology.
they're already talking about taking fluoride out of the water. So what happens when the United States starts pumping all these chemicals into the air and it starts floating up into Canada, and Trudeau says, "Get that anti-aging US air out of here. You're infringing on our global emissions quota up here." Um, I, I I suspect there will be certain lines in the sand, and that the church will draw those lines where they think it's prudent. And
We haven't yet.
yeah, well, the Catholic Church has. Yeah.
Well, it picks and chooses.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, the
Um,
church debates, and they have a conclave or something similar, and then yeah.
uh, it's Well, have you ever, if you needed a new heart valve, that I mean, there's a reason why people don't. If you live to 60, I think you're more likely than not to live to 80. Um, and because people get stents and various treatments and surgeries that extend their life. The rationale will probably be, what's the difference between living to 80 and living to 120 and living well? When do you cut yourself off?
I think the line in the sand will be if they develop a treatment that stops or reverses aging.
Okay, so you don't want to be.
I used to know a decent amount about this when I considered myself a transhumanist. Like there's a lot of research going on about, well, all those diseases that you're talking about, Mark, like if aging wasn't a thing, those diseases, like you're basically hitting whack-a-mole where if you just
Right.
stop aging, then you're good if your body doesn't degrade slowly over time. So there's a lot of research on it. I have no idea if they'll ever crack the aging code. I could very well see God giving it to us as a choice, whether we trust in the world or we trust in him. So I don't know. I'm not saying it wouldn't be hugely disruptive, but I suspect it would be the kind of thing where the people who linger on all of the youthful creativity and change that comes from there's a reason that like the biggest startup companies were all started by 20 somethings,
Mhm.
but there's also a reason that all the popes are over 70.
Mhm.
Each age group, it has its purpose.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying you can't have creativity in your elder years. I'm not saying that, but if you look at like musicians that became breakout successes over 50, it's pretty sparse. And yeah, so I don't know. Like the technological landscape is so weird. Like what does it mean once the brain starts being changed by microbots or by, I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Would it be considered suicide if you don't choose to stop aging?
Well, in the novel I wrote, I'm not really going to plug it, but in the novel I wrote, I made a philosophical point that said like, the greatest tyranny that was ever inflicted upon the human species was that we each age and die. So obviously we have a moral responsibility to stop and reverse that tyranny, because what I mean by tyranny is without our consent, without our permission, our bodies age, decay, and die. And we don't have a say in that. And so that's called tyranny in modern parlance, when something happens to us against our will. So that, of course, the vast majority of people are going to jump on the same way that they jump on the Ozempic train. They're especially going to jump on the aging train. Because we no longer as a society have the ability to trust in something beyond our own desires, wants, interests. That's why.
Are you still yourself if you get brainworms rather than brain bots? So RFK, is that our dig at RFK?
I remember Peterson talking about this amoeba that would infest people's brains, and then they were more likely to buy a motorcycle and have self-destructive behavior. I think that was Peterson. Or not an amoeba, but maybe a...
Are you willing to be the ugliest one in the nursing home? Well, that's in our generation, in this time, you've got. Well, it's so weird. You have I've heard there are 20-something girls getting Botox injections. What the hell is that for? What's that about?
What happens when society sees your aging as an imposition on society's necessity to care for you, and that requires by law that you stop aging so that they no longer have to spend as much healthcare
Right.
lives on you?
Right. Because if you stop at 35, 40, even 45, you can keep working indefinitely. You can remain a wage slave for um, hundreds or thousands of years, right? If that's
But
the
well,
economy you're living in.
I think at that point, yeah, then yeah, we'll have technology that'll render. Yeah, I don't know. Part of me thinks though that throughout history we've always thought doomsday, like when the cotton gin comes out, or shoot, what was the movement? The anti-technology movement. There was
No,
a guy named a guy named
Luddites.
Ludd. Yeah, the
Luddites.
Luddites. And yeah, so like every
Right in the
generation,
sun. Go
like,
ahead.
and so on one hand, you got the people that say like the apocalypse is nigh, and then you have the other hand. It's like every generation thinks that the technological change is going to be the undoing of everything,
Right.
and I'm somewhere in between those camps. Um, I do think that depending on where AI goes over the next 10 years to 20 years, we're going to know the answer to that question. We're going to know the answer. Okay. It's going to be one of two things. Well,
Mhm.
three things. We could destroy ourselves before then. I hope that doesn't happen. So let's put that off the table. It's either going to be we hit a new era of stagnancy across the board. Some period of time where we both have population collapse, but also research collapse, trust collapse. And if you look at the number of, there's some metrics that you can use to measure this. It's the number of innovative research publications, stuff like that. There are signs that we're already entering a new stagnancy. We don't have post millennial. There are no like Zoomer startups that have reached like the $10 billion capitalization mark. Like all the last big startups were millennials. It was the Googles and the Facebook and the, all that stuff. So there are some signs that maybe we're reaching a new technological stagnancy. So it's either going to be that. So AI hits a limit and AI hits a limit where it can't actually innovate, and it's reliant on the best human knowledge and expertise that we have at any given point in time. Or we hit the singularity and then all bets are off,
Mhm.
where the AI starts improving itself at an exponential rate. And I have no idea what that looks like. So, hopefully we won't even be aware of it. We'll think we're continuing our existence, and that's where faith comes into play. Cause I don't see a better, like maybe the AI is already controlling everything. But that's where faith comes into play, because we're stuck here now regardless. So
Well, the greatest they have the three things that last are faith, hope, and love, and the greatest is love. You need hope to love and faith to have hope, and so you know that's what I don't see with all the doomerism. I don't see much faith in it. I mean, the world will be whatever the world is.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, I'm not even sure if what we're experiencing. I know it's popular within the corner to think of it as collapse, but I'm not convinced. If you shoot yourself in the foot, is it really collapse? I mean,
Yeah.
so much of what America is going through is self-inflicted, and not just in the new latest iteration of the administration, but in prior administrations. We've been shooting ourselves in the foot repeatedly now for 20 years, but um, I guess it's
Yeah.
collapse when you can't do it anymore, right? I mean, if you keep doing it until you actually are crippled.
Like I would love a left that genuinely cares about the working class first and foremost. And so if the working class was the top priority,
Mhm.
followed by like family, that's it. I think that's what the left is serving. Um, right now it feels like, okay, most important thing is like stopping Trump, whatever that is, at all costs, right? Like we will stop him no matter what. That's what we have to do. But the problem is that case is much weaker now than it was in 2017. It's like that ship has basically sailed. Now, the best means of stopping Trump at this point is that the United States faces the full consequences of Trump's actions. And I mean that in terms of tariff consequences and other consequences. Sometimes, people just have to face the music, but I'd love the left to focus on, like I said, the working class, and they were focused on that, but increasingly, union participation, labor participation went down as industrialization went up, and then once the left really got into NAFTA and I don't even necessarily blame Clinton for that, but there was a spirit in the 90s of like the Rage Against the Machine. There was a spirit that said like, no, we still need to care about the working class, but that steadily died, and instead we went for cheap consumer products from the rest of the world.
Well, why I'm not sure. I think you're not listening. If you think that there isn't a vibrant left, I think that the case that they're making is actually pretty strong. It's just that you're not hearing it because you're siloed from it. AOC and Bernie are having huge rallies. There's a lot of media there's left anti-Trump. YouTube is loud and getting louder. It's in a shambles because McMosif says it's in a shambles. Well, where is it? He said it was in a shambles. There it is. I think there's some attention bias in that. You're just not paying attention. Yes, they're writing, they're thinking, they're in the same shambles that the Republicans were in when Trump lost to that other guy, Biden.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody who loses is in a shambles until they pick up the pieces.
But what I'm saying is, at least my perspective and I consider myself a moderate. Now, maybe I'm a weird moderate, maybe I'm not an accurate moderate. But my perspective simply as a moderate is that most of the left's focus is still on fighting. Like, you come into relationship with whatever you fight. So the act of fighting Trump is producing an opponent processing response that's strengthening. It's the politics of resentment. So if the right is primarily motivated, and I believe this, by the way, the right is primarily motivated by the elitists that they see as having ruined America over the past 20 or 30 years. I don't think that's an accurate framing, but what I'm saying is that that's the primary motivator of the right, is they're fuming at the Harvards and the elitists. And so what gives them fuel is the fight against, or the fight for, the elitists. So the fight for Harvard and the fight, to protect the elite institutions, et cetera. That gives the right more fuel. And so the primary fight, yeah. Anyway, I know you have to go.
No, I've got 5 more minutes.
Okay. Yeah. And so, like all of the focus on the other side, all the resentment and anger of focus on the other side, mainly serves to strengthen the other side. It's like, oh, there's a there that needs to be fought against because it's so strong and it's so important towards anyway.
You could see. Here's the thing.
Game.
Here's the thing. Yeah. If Trump, okay, there's no question that if the tariff regime is, I mean, it's flip flopping all over the place. He's disrupting businesses and their ability to plan. We know that if he keeps the tariffs in place with China, um, it's going to be a rough Christmas for a lot of people. A lot of things that people want to get their kids are not going to be available or going to be more expensive. At some point, it'll start showing up on shelves. It'll start interrupting supply chains. They're already talking about, whole businesses, whole categories of businesses that people were making a living on Amazon, importing stuff from China, just stuff. I mean, shoelaces and T-shirts and whatever, people sell on Amazon. I saw one interview where, the cost for her stock was to bring it into the country was $3,500. This is a small business. She ran it out of her house or garage or something. Like $3,500 to bring it into the country. And now the cost for her is I mean, crazy more expensive, right? So then she has to say, well, am I going to ship? If the order was made, what do I do? Was in a frozen state. Do I look for a new supplier if I can get that supplier, or do I wait and hope for the whim of the great leader to say no? We'll give it we'll pause the tariff or something. So these people are going to be out of business really quickly. People like that, small businesses. Then you have other people. What are you going to do? You're going to pay 100% plus tariffs for car parts, and parts to repair your car, parts to build new ones. People, it's going to ricochet through the economy. I mean, it's just I don't see how. My point being is this: the left can look really in disarray. They don't have to be that well organized when the great leader and his party are burning the country down. You just, look at what the price of eggs did to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. What do you think it's going to do when you have one or two bad Christmases and you can't replace your car, or you can't find work that will pay the rent? I mean, you don't have to be that competent to win against what is it basically an administration of kleptocrats and incompetence. What do you think?
Well, when Trump started the tariffs, one thing I thought to myself is like, all right, if we're gonna do this, let's fucking do it. Like, if we're actually going to turn off the spigot of cheap American consumerism and say we're going to prioritize American jobs and manufacturing here, let's fucking do it. Like, okay, go. Like, are our eyes bigger than our stomachs? Are we willing to tolerate a recession, unemployment, higher costs for the short term so that we bring some manufacturing back to the US? And the answer seems to be no, we're not, because we love our cheap stuff, and any burp in the economy we see as a threat.
But it's not just cheap goods. It's not just cheap goods, because it's also the status of our currency. Mm-hmm. So, if we've basically declared war against the world. We are, without making any consideration of
I
building
agree.
friendships.
I agree. It was so dumb to put tariffs on everyone simultaneously. So dumb.
And then put tariffs on items that we have no capacity for building right now at home. So there is no domestic solution to the chip problem. right now.
I mean, is the problem, so you have to prioritize, and Trump's not willing to prioritize, in my mind. Is the problem China, or is the problem that we need to bring manufacturing back to the United States? And those are two different problems. And we have to prioritize which one's more important. And we have to say, okay, we're getting everyone else on board in order to be allied against China, which I'm sort of with Ezra Klein, and I'm not convinced that that's the right move. I don't know. I don't know what the right move is. But I do think working class wages are and should be a priority. I just don't know how to bring those working class wages up in a constructive way that simultaneously doesn't also raise prices and hurt the U.S. in other ways. I do believe in free markets, generally speaking. I do. And it's helped the world immensely. NAFTA has helped the world immensely since the 90s. It's helped the U.S. too. I do believe that. But it's come at a cost of many manufacturing jobs in the U.S. because the thing is, when the rest of the world is here and the U.S. is here, in order to reach equilibrium, they're all going to rise, but U.S. is going to come down, and so that, and all the wealth of NAFTA concentrated in the hands of the ownership class, because all the wealth comes back into the big multinational companies and stockholders, which are all wealthier people. And, go ahead.
No, just how bad do you have to be to drive the world into China's arms, to make China look like the reasonable trading partner?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's terrible. So yeah.
I think the future is extreme abundance in the long term, and not even the long term, probably medium term. The next few years are going to be rough. Trump will probably die or leave office the luckiest president in the world, probably because AI will explode before he leaves office, and we'll have exponential growth and new capabilities coming so fast. Everybody's head will be spinning. It could easily juice the economy in ways that we can't even imagine. And so, in spite of all of this incompetence, tech may just accidentally save his lunch. But, it's going to be a very hard short term.
Yeah, I think what the tariff situation has shown me so far is that our eyes are bigger than our stomach, and we don't have the capacity or the will to actually endure or suffer a short-term serious problem. And we'll see. And then on top of that, it was just boneheaded in terms of timing and in terms of doing it unilaterally to our friends.
Yeah, people will suffer. Americans will endure a lot for a good cause. I mean, whether it was World War II or whether it was 9/11, people were willing to sacrifice. Now, the leaders, again, competency. You had competent leaders in World War II. You had incompetent leadership after 9/11. Nothing on this scale. I mean, this scale of incompetence makes George Bush look like rocket scientist.
Yeah, we'll see.
But everybody voted for it. I mean,
we're entering into uncharted waters. Yeah,
no doubt. Yeah, and if you lose reserve currency status, like I said some time ago, it's our ability to fund a Navy that has global reach is going to come very quickly to an end. Just to maintain it. I mean, just to keep, you can have the ships, but keeping them afloat and keeping the planes flying and the fuel deliveries and so on and so forth. All that stuff requires goods, material that's imported, and complex, intricate alliances and relationships that this administration is just smashing to bits. So anyway, you get the last word. 30 seconds. Sorry, I wasn't better. I wasn't a more energetic conversation partner, Neal.
No, it's fine, Mark. I'm happy to do this anytime. And I will say that I one hope I have is that more people at least see that government is not they're not the primary problem or solution to, let's say, the meaning crisis, or that I'm increasingly convinced that nihilism is the primary threat, and a purpose for living is the primary goal. It's the reason why we're here. And maybe this ping ponging will bring people back to the church, but just as importantly as back to the church, I think that's a side effect of it. But I think it's that search for that which is transcendent and binds us all together. So
I promise you the last word, but that's why I'm not into the politics so much. I'm interested in understanding the lay of the land. I want to understand kind of where we're going. That's why we're talking more for understanding than to make a point, even though I played with ideas, images and stuff. But I want to have an understanding where things are going so that I can be there for people at a spiritual level. Idea of, that's what the church is for. Help carry each other's burdens.
It's possible that we are in the early stages of a recession now. It's possible. And I think that's the reason that we left. We'll see what damage the tariffs have already done in the coming months. We'll go from there. But keep the faith. That's all I got. Keep the faith.
Yeah, agreed. Maybe we'll do this again soon, and we'll just open it up right up to this to people to come in and ask questions and stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Neal, for your time. You're very generous, my friend. Have a good night.
You too. Apologies for cursing.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.